There's a very influential part of my childhood, which was being part of an army family and being dragged from army base to army base, having to settle in, having to get on with new elements of life. There were big cultural differences. I spent a couple of years living in Malaysia, many years on different occasions commuting to and from Germany when I was at school in England. So it was having to build lots of little lives. And make a go of a range of different environments, often for quite short periods of time, which I think gave me a sense of restlessness. And I've got to make the best of what I've got here now. I can't say this is what it's going to be like forever. Let's just get on with the present. What I did after that 2 years of volunteering in Borneo was I actually went back to legal research briefly to work out what I really wanted to do. And I worked out I wanted to work in international development work, tackling poverty around the world. And that's what I did for the next 20 odd years. What was quite important was that even when I came back from those 2 years, I didn't know this is what I wanted to do. So one of the lessons really is for people to be thinking, how can I test what I really want? Because some people just know it in a kind of apostolic way. I didn't. I had no such claim to a life path. And it was stepping outside and thinking deep down, I don't want to take this work home with me. I don't mind if tomorrow's a holiday, as opposed to when can I get on with it. That's led me indirectly to the role I'm in now, but via some fantastic jobs on the way. I don't just see them as being stepping stones. They were important roles in their own right. I learned a lot. I got a great experience around the world. I had to deal with some really challenging issues in very different contexts and cultures. Maybe the most dramatic was working in Bangladesh in the early 90s when there was a cyclone that killed more than 100,000 people. And my first week in my job leading the Oxfam program in Bangladesh was what's Oxfam's response to this cyclone? And disaster relief wasn't my background at all. So it was a lot about general management and getting the best out of a lot of people who knew a lot more about the technicalities than I did. I worked mostly in the voluntary sector for charities, and then in 1990 I joined the UN. It felt like a real career achievement. After 3 months I thought everyone in this organisation is a genius and I'm a complete fool. I just could not understand what everyone was doing and how they were doing it, and why, for all my practical field experience working in different parts of the world alongside poor people and communities, I just couldn't get a hang of this bureaucracy. And I spent the next 3 months after that thinking, the emperor's wearing no clothes here. They're not doing anything, they're just moving spreadsheets around in what were early day computers very slowly, with very poor connectivity. And I understand it all, but no one's got a clue what's going on. And then, of course, I gradually realised that neither of the two were true. But this was too big and too bureaucratic an organisation in such a big bureaucratic country as Bangladesh for me to make a blind bit of difference in. And I felt I'm just going to be a little pawn in this game for too long. And in 20 years' time, yes, I could be achieving something, but here and now, I really didn't believe I could. And so I took the decision to leave. So linking to the theme of your exploration, it was a situation where I thought it's not just a question of persevering and finding way around. This system is too big for me. And actually I made the decision to get out. I felt that was the only thing that was going to be true to me. And I think for your readers thinking about, can I make a difference here? And if not, actually, can I be true to myself and say I need to go somewhere where I can, is a crucial decision. And when I got to the interview, the chairman of the board, supported by the human resources director, who was really acting as his aide on this, asked me about 5 questions about how would you react in this situation and how do you feel about rules? And it was because my psychometric profile had really borne out to them that a leader isn't someone who's born to follow the rules. A leader's got to be able to recognise their value, but also recognise that his or her job is to get beyond those rules. They're there to support fair play and good practice, not to be followed. And I had to find a way of convincing him, and it was quite explicit in the interview. Eventually I said, look, I suspect you're talking about the fact that I answered, on the scale of 0 to 5 in each of these different fields, and they chuckled and we discussed it. But that was part of my pitch to them. We've got to be that very commercially minded entity where you know the cost of everything and the return on it. But at the same time, we're a big campaigning force for change. We're trying to change the very policies of the government that we're also competing to deliver the services for. So you can have Mencap people outside the town hall criticising cuts to budgets or discrimination against disabled people, while you have Mencap people inside the town hall negotiating for the next contract. Trying to weave those things together to be a force for good is really when my job becomes a question of adding value to what my colleagues can do better. We've got better campaigners than me, we've got better business managers than me. My job is to try and hold the two things together and make them a powerful force. So you're getting the best out of volunteers, free labour, social support to people, community engagement, policy research and campaigning for change. At the same time, you're delivering this several £100 million enterprise where you get the pricing wrong by twopence an hour and you're really in big trouble. We've had to re-engineer just like many corporates would. We've lost several hundred middle managers as part of doing this. At the same time, we've got to carry on those policy and research and campaigning functions so that we can actually look the senior ministers in the eyes and say, what you're doing is harming the welfare of disabled people. Do you know that? And really spell it out to them. Keep the two things running side by side. Any profit we make on the services goes into paying for those other activities, which is why the weaving them together is crucially important. The first and foremost, you can put it in lots of different ways, but it's about really understanding yourself. Because there are all sorts of coaching manuals that try and change us, and very few of them actually will ever change us. So to me, the crucial one is thinking very hard and reflecting on your own achievements, your own failures, your own experiences, to get a real understanding of who you are and how, in what direction and how far you can push that. Because you can push it, we all push it, but we have to push it in a way that's true to who we originally are. That came out to me really vividly. I had 2 interviews for jobs that I would have been genuinely excited about before the Mencap one came along. And I think there's also a level in honesty that we're not always the person that everybody wants, even if we're in a senior role. And in the first one, I came second. And the feedback I got was that I wasn't ruthless enough. They were looking for someone who was really going to get in and transform this organisation. And when I came to the second one, it was a year later. I wasn't in a desperate hurry to find this new job, and I wanted something that excited me. Again, there were 2 of us left, and they called us back for a second interview, and they asked us to do a trip with the chair of the trustees. And at the end, to cut a longer story short, I didn't get that job. And what they said is that actually the organisation is in a bigger crisis than we've been able to be open about. We want someone who's going to change it tomorrow. And actually, that's not me. Mine is one of quite determined evolution. So in all the interaction, it was, well, I'd listen on this, I'd build on that, I'd explore that, I'd try and get people to this. And what they wanted was someone who was going to come in, a big knife, move very fast, re-engineer. That's not me. The person they appointed it to basically fell on his own sword after less than a year. And I'm, I hope, making steady progress in my role. So there's something there about being true to your own character and building on it and having that determination that you can make it happen. You don't have to do it by the rules, but you have to do it in a way that's steady, respectful of others, working with them. And the biggest challenge, I think, to pick up another one of your questions, is that sense of how do you move steadily in a big organisation, but take the organisation with you. I will never see at least 7,000 of the 8,000 staff who work for Mencap because they work in other people's houses, not in a Mencap office. And they're paid to go to that house in the morning, go and have a life with those individuals, not to stay in an institution. So it's how do you communicate that vision and how do you take people with you that I'm still learning myself. I haven't got it right. But it's the determination that you've got part of that vision. It doesn't all have to be there on day one, but you build on it steadily in a way that's consistent with your own values. So it's being true to yourself, it's being true to your values, and then it's working steadily on them, rather than believing that for everyone you can change everything the day after tomorrow. There's also something that I've learned about understanding how others see you, because that's partly helps you improve, but it partly helps you to recognize what strengths you can play on yourself. And so there is an element that if we can get people to give us clear feedback, especially at a senior level, it makes a real difference. We all expect to get feedback at a junior or middle level. We've got managers appraising us. But when you're asking for upward feedback and people can give it honestly, you recognise a number of things. The first is, and my predecessor as Chief Executive in my first such role pointed this out to me, people are listening to every word, every piece of intonation, and you're influencing people in a way that you never realise you're doing. You lean over someone and you ask how it's going. Depending on your tone of voice, they either think they're being criticised, they're being praised, or actually you've got a real interest, or you haven't got a clue what they do. It can be any of those. So people are hanging on your every piece of intonation. But equally, it gives you a chance to reflect, how do I use this for the organisation's good? Those bits that I'm good at, those bits I'm weaker at, those bits I understand. And in my current job, I really started it knowing very little about disability services in the UK. I had a level of awareness on disability issues from international work, but that's very different to the way those services are run in a developed, richer country in North America or in Europe. And so I was having to be very open with people about what I didn't know, but where I thought I needed to reflect and add value. And there's a level in that transparency that seemed to work well. So the feedback I was getting a year later was, you've been quite respectful, you haven't been a soft touch, but you've actually guided and you've built on and you've asked us to explain and justify. And I think all of us can be doing that at middle levels. There's something that's wonderful in one of Leslie Kossoff's book, actually. She talks about that we recruit people because they're going to bring new ways of thinking into our organisation, and then we manage them so that they follow our way of thinking. And it's trying to embrace that individuality and give others the chance to help ourselves grow with it at the same time as we're helping them.